Hello, everyone, and as always, female Frodo Baggins here. Well, we're in the second half almost of July. Hard to believe how fast this month is going, and we've had two of the major blockbusters, and both of them, while Jurassic World Rebirth did great at the box office, despite diminishing returns, Superman did okay. I did not like either of those films, to say the least. But we have one more film on the roster, and that's going to be it for the major films of this year until December. Fantastic Four. And as you know, I have a particular upset about this movie because I had wanted a Fantastic Four movie to do them right for so long, and it didn't look like we were gonna get that. But what it basically was so many elements that just turned me off of this film that I became disappointed by, that I detailed in another video. But the big thing around it for me, the thing that broke me, the thing that made me think, well, that's a bust over this film, was what they said about Johnny Storm some months ago. Basically, they said they were getting rid of his original personality. They were getting rid of the womanizing, the immaturity that made him, fight with the thing and all of that kind of stuff, because they were worried about where we are culturally. And so that told me, because Disney still has these hang-ups, which I don't think anyone in the mainstream would have minded that at all, they had to remove Johnny Storm's flaws, and we weren't gonna get that version of the accurate version of the character. Why that upset me so much? Because after seeing this for so many years, stuff like, the original version of Wish being changed, and Sokka's sexism being changed, even though it's portrayed as a bad thing, I've been so tired of seeing unnecessary changes that misunderstand the original point of characters or avoid certain storylines because we feel like we need to cater to somebody or some group that doesn't exist. And disappointed me on the movie because I thought that tells me that Disney and Marvel haven't learned a thing. They're still not catering to their main audience. They still are not able to make the decisions to give us the correct versions of these characters, and that was that for me. But recently we got a new TV spot of Johnny Storm that specifically showcases his character, and it adds up with some rumors that I've heard of the final cut of this film that I just need more confirmation of. But this clip makes me think, okay, what was with that original interview about changes to his characters? So basically what we see in the clip is Johnny Storm is hitting on the female Silver Surfer. He tries to catch up with her when she leaves after giving the first message of Galactus, and he lies that they connected and had a moment when really she just got rid of him. She used her board and she flipped him away. So Johnny is just playing it up like they were just having a romantic moment, even though that's not what happened, and he apparently thinks that the female Silver Surfer is hot. So we see that Johnny in these clips that we've been getting is a very jokey character, and he does have his flirtatious side, and he does have, he's described as the most popular member of the Fantastic Four, and he's got a fan club of fangirls and all that kind of stuff. And this isn't that far off from the original version of Johnny Storm.
I get it. Johnny loves space. Johnny loves women.
And I would like to point out, no one has a problem with him being portrayed like this, so the original controversy wouldn't have to exist. It's like, okay, what was that original interview exactly? Now, I want to say, though, when the original interview came out, there was a lot of talk from the defenders of the MCU and the MCU fans that people were ridiculous, and they framed people's arguments about it as, oh, you're just that mad you're not going to see Johnny Storm hit on a woman. That was not it. The point was changing Johnny Storm's personality and his flaws for an audience that doesn't exist for no reason. But that crowd of MCU fans is now not only saying that people should apologize for ever doubting Joseph Quinn and this version of the character, but they're also saying that, see, he's such a playboy, that's so Johnny, and I'm like, now you say that, but before you were saying that this problem wasn't a big deal and that no one should be upset about the change and that no one should say that it isn't going to be his actual character. So I just find myself frustrated by the discourse from MCU fans that it always has to be, at least in the Twitter space, and maybe these are just Slack accounts I'm responding to, but it always has to skew it in the favor of the studio and what they're doing. So first, apparently his character was going to be changed, and that wasn't a problem, and now it doesn't seem as changed, and that's a good thing because they're respecting the source material. So I don't understand MCU fans here, but I want to say this is not directly an accurate version of Johnny Storm in this sense that, yes, he does seem flirtatious in this version. He does seem like he kind of fails at that, maybe a bit more of a cocky facade, and he does have his, like, you know, the fan club behind him. So a lot of those, and he's very jokey, so a lot of those elements are from the comic book version of Johnny Storm. And I'm gonna eat crow a tiny bit, but not until I've seen the entire movie. I appreciate seeing those elements here. However, he's still not entirely accurate, and he's still not completely doing it for me. I think Joseph Quinn, from what we've seen, is giving a fine performance. He's still kind of a different version of Johnny Storm. Like, they did mention in interviews, and this is proving to be accurate here, that it was going to be more of a melancholy version of Johnny Storm. And that's what we see. Johnny would say what he says unless it's a universe-ending situation with a smile on his face. Johnny is almost consistently frowning in this version. You can tell it comes from a more melancholy place from this character. He's not as loud and bombastic or as immature as the original version of Johnny Storm, I would say. And Joseph Quinn, I'm not trying to attack anyone for their age, but I am saying Joseph Quinn is in his 30s and Johnny Storm should at least be, or at most be, in his early 20s. This character is supposed to start as a teenager. So it's not exactly accurate, and there's still a lot of changes here, and a lot of people have noted that this seems to be a version that's almost similar to Robert Downey Jr. and, you know, the melancholy place that his ego and his jokes and his character came from. So I do think that's interesting that maybe they're trying to recreate Robert Downey Jr., or maybe this is just what they think is the acceptable modern day version of Johnny Storm's personality. We have to see. I would say, like, I'm still not saying, I'm not eating crow yet because I still want to see his entire character in the context of this movie. I would still say that was very poor judgment to lead with that kind of interview that made me fly off the handle because it made it sound like they completely changed his character in order for this movie to happen, and it just was really tone deaf. Now, is the movie fixed for me? Like I said, no, it's not. First of all, I have to see the context once again, but we've gotten more and more clips of the movie, and I do notice kind of a shift from it, that they stopped only focusing on Sue. For months and months on end, they were only focusing on Sue as a character, and that made me really concerned, especially with leaks that I have read. The entire plot is behind the scenes about how it's essentially going to be Sue Storm's movie, and some other characters like Reed Richards, for example, are going to get the shaft in comparison to her. I noticed after that conversation blew up a little bit, though, the marketing did start to focus more on the other characters. So I do wonder from Marvel's perspective if they are being strategic in these marketing materials so that they are warding off any criticism in those areas, because they need these films to be successful. But I gotta say, it's still not entirely doing it for me. Why? Pedro Pascal. I'm sorry to say it. I said this in my last video on Fantastic Four. Pedro was going to be the make or break for me for this movie because, or I should say that I knew even if they changed elements I was concerned about, that he would still break it. Because listen, we are getting reveals of the plot and they're spoiling the movie now. That I read from the plot leak that I did find interesting, like the idea that it's essentially Franklin Richards or the world. Galactus wants Franklin Richards because he can create universes, and it becomes him or the universe, essentially. That is a good conflict, a great moral conflict that sounds very interesting, and I gotta be honest, there's some things about this movie lately in the current marketing that do give me a little bit more hope for it than I had for, say, Superman. But Pedro still nixes it. When I see him in these clips that we're getting from it now, and we did see some of the CGI for his powers, which looks fine, but Pedro just comes off as such a wimpy, subdued Reed Richards.
Is there any chance you could absorb this darkness into the Dark Force dimension? We need to come up with a formula to reverse the vampiric effects on innocent civilians.
Could you take us through how you defeated Galactus? How we did?
We didn't.
Are we safe?
Are we safe? I don't know.
I don't sense any of the character in him at all, nor do I really get inspired by this new superhero. He's just a wimp in this movie. And I know that Pedro has been upset by some of the people criticizing his casting, but he just was not right for this role at all. And it's very disappointing because if I could get on board with anything else for this film, I still just do not see him as the character. And I'm wondering, Marvel, could this be saved at all? Could you remake it? Could you recast Pedro Pascal after all of this? I think it's a bit too late. One last thing I want to mention about this movie and some oddities I see happening is that the runtime has been significantly shortened. It used to be well over 2 hours. Now it's only an hour and 55 minutes. And I wonder if that is also in response to criticism. I did read, maybe potential spoilers, the original ending of this film was going to have Sue be the hero that saves the day again, and I'm wondering if they have reworked or chopped that once again after criticism. I guess we just have to see what happens. But even with these elements that I'm seeing that might seem a little bit better, I'm still not trusting this to turn out. I'll believe it when I see it because the superhero genre and Marvel's track record have been so bad lately. I'm still not trusting this to turn out to be a great film. I always would want to give things a chance and see if they could work out in the end, but I'm ultimately not completely trusting this because of everything that has happened and the pattern recognition that I know every time I get my hopes up, I wind up being dashed again. But that's all I got for you guys today. What do you think of this? Do you think that there's any chance in the universe for this movie to turn out? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.